Good afternoon and welcome to Just Jocelyn. I'm so glad that you could join us. And yes, once again, we are here with, you could call it breaking news, you could call it hot news, you could call it, oh my gosh, but we've got Miss Laurie Ortolano here again to bring us up to date with the absolute insanity that's going on in the city of Nashua and the state itself, New Hampshire. Where do we go? Who do we trust? It seems like everywhere we turn as pro se litigants and as full litigants with an attorney, that we're all getting beaten over the head. We're getting, you have no standing. You can't do this. You can't do that. Remanded back. Do this. It's absolutely insane. You look at Daniel Richard. You look at Al Brandano. You look at me. You look at Wayne. You look at you, Laurie, Paula Johnson, Regina Barnes, Brenda Stone. We've got 10 to 15 litigants that are going up against the system with evidence that is just monumental, but yet the kick in the teeth happens over and over again. So talk to me about the challenges, challenges with Nashua's open records and the Supreme Court.
So, got a couple orders and rulings that came out over the last couple of weeks, and they made headlines in the newspaper. The city sent them out very quickly to cover them. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the Supreme Court order on the assessing police reports I was looking for at the end of 2019.
Okay.
Now, wrap your head around the fact that this was 2019, and I finally have an order dated April 2nd of 2025. And, for cases involving records that are expedited, your ability to get through the courts in an expedited matter just are very difficult. And it seems like the expedited avenue that's available to you under the statute stops when it enters the Supreme Court. They don't do an expedited hearing anymore.
Right.
And I'm not certain why. I don't think that the law or statute exempts them from it, but I'm a little bit critical of the fact that they don't become expedited. But the order I got, so what happened is I won certain parts of my assessing records case.
Okay.
And the city eventually agreed to provide all the property record cards as public information. They provided the security videos that were off the cameras running in City Hall all over the building, but mainly I was focused on the ones in the assessing office. They agreed to provide those videos. The court looked at them and said, hey, there's nothing confidential in here or public privacy rights. So give her those and give her the property record cards. But the judge also ruled that I could be compensated with fees because the city should have known on those. And the second thing was he ruled that the police audio video files and the transcripts that were made of those 9 interviews should have been given to me. And he ordered the city to pay fees for not providing those. So those issues went up on appeal. And so the only real record issue was getting those police audio video files and the transcripts.
Okay.
They disclosed the other records. And the other part of the case to the Supreme Court was fees. What were you going to pay me?
Yep.
Now, this case was my entry case to the court system on right to know. And I hired a lawyer. And I hired a second lawyer. And I spent $225,000 to bring this into court and to try and get it adjudicated through.
Not a whim.
No. And I hired my first lawyer with the advisement of him that these are expedited cases. I had 4 claims at the time I filed the suit, that the judge would hear it rapidly and we would get it resolved. And I filed it in February. I think it was early February. And come May, there was a hearing scheduled. But I found that hearing notice, and it was written very unclearly.
Cryptically?
Yes. And what I find is the court, and certainly this happened with a lot of my cases, they did not issue clear orders, and I believe it was deliberate. I think it's unclear orders that cause attorneys to have to go back and forth and argue and get clarification, spend more of your client's money, and then have the court say, no, I'm thinking it's going to be one of these. And if we want to have a merits hearing, we have to reschedule. So when my attorney told me we had a hearing in May, he said, we're going to have a merits hearing and your case is going to be heard. So February, May, awesome. 4 claims. I'm going in for a hearing. Well, then the notice comes out and it's really not clear what it is.
Yep.
And so my attorney calls Attorney Bolton and he says, well, I don't think it's a merits hearing at all. I'm having a case structuring conference so that, we got to do discovery and we got to flesh this out and we need a lot of time. And I'm thinking, a hearing's not going to happen for another year or so. So sure enough, my attorney writes to the court and says, we have a dispute here. Our understanding is we're coming in for a merits hearing.
Yeah.
The city understanding is we're coming in for a case structure for you to push this thing out further for a hearing down the road. What's going on? And the court wrote back and said, oh no, we'll make it a case structuring. This is going to be pushed off. So that was my first, and I remember being so upset by that, literally, because the whole concept that I was going to have control of the costs, I could see going out the window.
So it's funny you should mention that, just to interject. So when Karen, Wayne, and I brought our case for the Secretary of State moving the date for when you could change your parties for a primary, your party affiliation, the Secretary of State moved it out 4 months. We were supposed to go in for a merits hearing, and it turned out to be, I can't even remember what it was called, but some ridiculous thing pushing out. And it's like, no, we need an answer right now because the primary is in January.
Right. They, and then the first case,
MOs.
The first case I did on my own as a pro se litigant after this, which I wrote in 2021, I got a notice from the court that I was going in to have a merits hearing. I filed it, and 2 months later, I had a merits hearing. I thought, that's great. I got a merits hearing. I go in prepared to pitch my case.
Not a merits hearing.
I get in there, and Bolton says, Your Honor, I don't think this is a merits hearing at all. I think this needs to be a case structuring hearing. And again, we need to do discovery. We need to flesh it out. I was shocked, and the court agreed. Oh, yeah, we're not going to do a merits hearing. And I said, but my order, my notice of hearing says I'm having a merits hearing.
This is so interesting because when Karen redid her case, they did the same thing. It's supposed to be merit, and they get you in there, and you're ready for merit, and then they turn around and do case structuring or whatever they want.
Pull the rug
out.
So
as a pro se, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I can't change gears that fast.
I can't. For me, you can't change gears effectively. The city was doing it as a case structuring hearing, but would not share their case structuring order with me. So I didn't even get to see what they were thinking. There was so much animus that everything was being done secretly. And I felt like the judge had teamed with the city every time I walked in there. I really did.
What else could you feel at this point?
And I
stacked against us.
I do. And so this order comes out. So when I moved my way through the assessing records, and I won half the case.
Okay.
And I did get the city agreed to give most of the records. And the only outstanding thing was the police audio video files and the actual movies, the transcripts.
Gotcha.
So it goes on appeal. They appeal it. And
the city appeals it.
City appeals it. Okay. So now I'm in an appeal case. I'm not an appellate lawyer. I've already paid $225,000. So I go to the lawyer who represented me in the second half, and I say, what's it going to cost me to do an appeal? At least $25,000, but possibly more. There'll be more added. So I went to a second attorney I got word of, and I asked him, what would it cost for you to do an appeal? $50,000 flat rate. Now, honestly, Lynn, looking at this now, I really believe that attorneys look you up, look up your husband, look up your
who you are,
business,
your family,
check you out on a DMB,
Yep.
see that your husband owns a business, and they go, good, we can hit these people hard. And I think they prey on women more than men, that you're going to sign these deals and go with it. And they're just looking at your potential checkbook.
You're
a money bank.
You're
to
a money
them.
bank.
You are. And I realize that now more and more, having been in it.
Yep.
And even though you have money or your husband has a company, doesn't make you experienced or smart about working your way through the judicial system.
Correct.
I mean, my husband and I sat down a couple months ago, and he said to me, I've done a lot of business litigation. I own a company. I've been around the block on this. He goes, I got to tell you, I had no experience in civil litigation, and I can't believe what has happened here. He goes, this is insane. So I told both attorneys, it was Mother's Day, and I remember having coffee in bed and typing an email saying, I'm not going with either of you. I feel this case has risk because both attorneys said you should win. This is easy. You know, you have a very strong case. You're going to get these fees back, which was like $63,000. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But if I was going to have to pay 50
to get 63,
and I was going to have to pay even 25 or 35, and they said, well, we're going to go for costs too. We'll go for costs for filing it. But that's a risk. You don't know. You got to get through
you're going to get that right.
And I looked at the emails last week that I had sent, and I said, I'm really concerned. I think this isn't, a shoe-in, an easy win. I'm not a lawyer. I have no experience. I depend on you folks, but there's a good bit of risk here. And I've already dumped $225,000, and I'm just not incurring more. No. I do think I should get some fees back, but I'm not going to throw good money after bad in making a decision that I feel pressured because I'm not skilled. I'm going on my own. Well, the attorney who gave me the quote of $50,000 then wrote to me and said, listen, I'll do it on contingency and we'll only be paid if we win. So I said, okay, happy to do that. It turned out he had an alcoholism problem. And I had a very difficult time with him.
Oh, Lord.
And I ended up reporting. And I think personal family problems, a drinking problem, and a competency problem. What tied to what, I'm not going to evaluate. Don't feel I had the best contracts from him, legal contracts. I ended up turning him into the PCC in January. And he was tied to my federal case. He was tied to a defamation case, and he was tied to this right to know, the Supreme Court appeal. Wow. It was honestly a very hellish situation for me. I just did not know how to deal with it. So
let me ask you this. What is the driving force? What is that makes you want to go forward with these cases? It's not about money. It's not about fame, because we'll talk about in the second half of the show what happened. What is it I'll tell you what I think afterwards, but what is it that drives you to continue with this? I
really believe that government is there for the people. Okay? And I hate seeing people abused. All of us, myself and others who come in. I hate seeing government take the position, if you're not smart enough, you're not entitled to anything. If you don't have enough money, you're not entitled to it. It's wrong. I mean, I grew up a middle child in a family with sisters where my older sister that I roomed with my whole life was pretty severely handicapped. She had been bitten by a mosquito carrying encephalitis. She was brain damaged at 3, pretty seriously. And those were in the days when those types of children were institutionalized. My parents said no. So I grew up as a middle child in a difficult situation with a family dynamic, and I always negotiated. And I always hated the abuse my sister got. My sister was so abused in school. Yeah. I mean, even me, I can remember kids saying to me, why is your retarded sister living at home? I have a sister and she's in an institution. Why do your parents keep her at home? And she used to be beat up, kicked, her clothes cut, torn, her purse stolen. They did everything to her in school. And I hated it. I really did. And I was 4 years younger than her. I hate that kind of abuse. And I feel this system is so abusive to its citizens that I just can't stand that.
It's so interesting that you say that, and not to digress and let our family secrets out, but both my brothers have hemophilia, and my one brother had hemophilia. And I remember in elementary school and middle school, and not too much in high school because I was a little older than him, but, let's just kick him and see if he bleeds. Let's beat him up and see how much blood he loses. So along the same lines, that if they couldn't see it, and the abuse in the schools was horrific.
It was.
The teachers did nothing. And it just occurred to me when you said that, that's why I fight all the time, because it's so wrong.
And I always thought I was this, I thought my fight would never be what it was.
Yep. Look at where you are now. Look at where I am now.
I know. You don't expect it. You don't think it's going to go on. I mean, I never thought this case over my assessing records would be in its 6th year.
So assessing records, you needed those from the city. Why? Just to recap for people.
Well, when they did the investigation into the assessing office, the police department, I believe they were biased.
Okay.
that those interviews were conducted more about investigating me than investigating the assessor who was sleeping in the parking lot and was the porn addict.
And had the pornography on the computer, all paid by tax dollars.
All paid by tax dollars.
You taxpayers.
And sure enough, so what happened is, when I filed a federal suit on First Amendment claims, the city gave us, in the federal suit, all of those transcripts, unredacted, that they claimed in the lower court were privacy interest issues that had to be redacted. They turned them over to us, no redactions. They gave us, and this is a weird story, this is part of my complaint against my attorney, my professional conduct complaint against him for misconduct. They turned over 4 or 5 of the audio video files that this attorney selected. So I had asked for all 9 files. I didn't believe the city had turned them over. I learned more recently through this that my attorney had requested the files, on his own selected 5 he wanted instead of all 9, that the city back in April of 2024 produced them, and my attorney never gave them to me. I didn't know they existed until September, well past when discovery had closed. Needless to say, I was furious.
Why wouldn't you be? You're paying a lot of money. We're strong-armed into hiring attorneys because the courts no longer, well, number one, originally we were supposed to be able to go to our legislative branch, and if it was something beyond that they were to take care of, then it would go to the judicial branch. But somehow language was changed and everything goes to the judicial branch. So we no longer, we don't have the protection we're supposed to have from the Constitution, let alone the legislature. So here we are with people that belong to a bar that, they pay dues to, which seems a little odd to me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. So what happened in this order is the Supreme Court came out with a pretty short order, 6 pages.
Okay.
And they said, hey, the judge and the lawyers screwed up.
Wow.
It was a smackdown on everyone. That the judge's order to pay fees for these property record cards should have never happened because there is no real case law. The Supreme Court has never heard a case on property record cards as public information. They claim there was no real case law. I believe there was one case. However, the Supreme Court said, no, not really any cases. So you can't say that the city should have known to give them because they didn't have case law to go to. So therefore, no fees on that. Then they said, as far as the audio, video files and the transcripts, the court should have done an in-camera review, which is true. I mean, if the court was going to say there was no privacy interest,
they should have looked at those videos themselves.
And the court did not do that.
So they made a decision based on who knows?
Who knows? And it really was a bad move. It was really a bad move. But I have found in court now, when I'm in Superior Court South, there is a movement, and the city does it. What's interesting is the city never asked for an in-camera review. If the city was so interested in protecting the privacy
why didn't they ask for
Why didn't they ask? And then why did they give me everything unredacted later? It really shows that in think there was a privacy issue. Because in the federal case, when they gave discovery, they could have redacted all the information.
Correct.
They gave us redacted records.
So giving you unredacted and access to the videos
showed me
potentially that they knew what the court was going to rule.
They thought the court was going to rule that those were public.
Yeah.
Well, the court came back and said, we can't rule that because the judge never looked at them. The judge never made certain there wasn't a personal privacy issue. So I guess the city ultimately determined that there wasn't
personal
one.
privacy of you?
No, of the employees who were being
just
interviewed.
Want to be clear with that.
Yeah,
okay.
The employees.
Yeah.
All the employees interviewed potentially had a personal privacy issue. Now, there's a balance test that has to be used by the court. The court came out with new case law some years ago and said you're going to balance privacy interests over public interest.
Well, as public servants, they should.
Right. And if public interest outweighs privacy interest, then the records are public.
Okay.
Now, apparently over time, the city decided, it's outweighed. We're going to give everything away unredacted. Mm-hmm. But because that didn't come from the court itself, from the judge, it's remanded back. So the fees I could have obtained on those were canceled, and they have to be reassessed if the judge looks at the videos and listens to the audio video files and determines that, in fact, they should have known. So, and honestly, it was such a punch in the face order to everyone involved with a legal degree.
Yep.
And, it wasn't, and I'm so glad I didn't pay. I'm so glad I didn't pay anyone $25, $35, or $50,000 to do this.
For slam dunk, which it wasn't.
It wasn't even close, and it wasn't a surprising order to me. It wasn't a surprising order. But I'm frustrated now because it's back, and what did we do? When this case first got sent to the Supreme Court, fees had not been calculated. So I wrote to the Supreme Court and said, the order wasn't completed down here.
Yeah.
I would like the Supreme Court to allow this to come back down to the lower court so fees can be calculated. And then when it comes up to you, you can decide if it's right or wrong.
Right or wrong, right. But let's get
it all
math
done. When it came back down to the court, the judge waited like 10 months to schedule a hearing on the fees. Again, an expedited case. And issued the order. It went up to the Supreme Court in August of 2022, and he issued the order on fees in July of 2023. A year. And it was frustrating to me that it took 12 months to get a fee order. I wonder now when I look back and think maybe the judge knew it was completely screwed up. But it angers me a little because they never cared about my money. The court never cared about my money. They never cared about the fees I had to pay. And I really think there was a lot of judicial misconduct in the handling of this right to know case from soup to nuts. And I feel that way about the Art Center in downtown Barriers case, same judge.
It makes me think, in our last 5 minutes here, that it seems we, the citizens, we pro se litigants, we people that are hardwired to keep fighting when something is wrong.
Right.
And the scary thing is that we all have buckets and buckets and ask my mom, my entire dining room table and the counter is covered. I'm sure your room has got, I was told about the binders that I need to go to the Laurie binder method. So that's my next project. But we have all this evidence. We have the Constitution on our side. I'm not going to say law because I don't think there is true laws out there. I think words have been switched around and they're using it for their own.
It's too interpretive now.
Yeah.
It's not matters of fact and law. No. It's matters of judicial discretion, and they're changing the law live. That is
while we're standing there. So
it's so difficult.
I don't think we have a fair shake.
No, we don't.
And if we can find an attorney that believes in constitutional law, foundational law, common law, which is God's law, not man's law, not administrative law. Most of these courts are administrative. They're not elected. And all Congress has to do is shut them all down because look at what they're doing. They're taking money in hand over fist and destroying people's lives.
Yes.
All based on interpretation, feelings, and whoever's lining the pocket. And that's a very, very sad commentary to come to at this point when we've got Marilyn Todd. We forgot about Marilyn. We forgot about the Noble Nine. We talk about Frank. We talk about Lou Gargiulo, who went with the chain of custody for our ballots that elect the people. I mean, if we might just have to get a bigger TV station and say, everybody that's filed pro se, what is your case? And go through it because it's huge.
Well, it's difficult. And, there was a case today up in Grafton County. One of these young guys filed a right-to-know petition against his town. Yep. And it was going to be heard up in Grafton County at 10 this morning. And I was going to go, but then I put it into my Waze, and it was 2 hours and 11 minutes one way. And I was like, that's I don't have enough time. Yep. But I wished him well, and I really, really hope this young man does well in there. But and he's doing it all by himself. I know how hard that is. And you know what happened? I won a couple cases early on, pro se, writing really basic filings. I didn't know case law. And I remember being in a hearing with Judge Temple where I was arguing, and it might have been on the Art Center. And when the hearing was ended, he said, I look forward to reading your case law. And that really stuck in my ear because I thought, case law? I don't even know how to find it. Yeah. I don't even know how to research it. I'm a pro se litigant. I'm not a lawyer. What am I going to do now? I remember going home and calling other citizens that I knew filed and saying, how do I find case law? What do I do? How do I research it? I don't know what words to use, the legal words. And that launched me into the case law hell game. And what it really was a judge saying, you really don't get to come in here as a pro se litigant and just present your case.
Which is totally against the Constitution.
It really
because
don't.
it says that all law must be understandable. That we're supposed to be following maxims of law and they're supposed to be protecting our rights, but yet they're doing this administrative law and flipping the words, adding feelings to it, it's insane. And the Constitution clearly says that we are entitled to represent ourselves. We are entitled to call our public servants to account for what they're doing. We are allowed to do all these things, yet these courts are abusing, insulting. I can't even come up with enough words of what they're doing to us, and yet it's our tax dollars that pay their salaries.
Oh yeah, I really think there should be a real significant reduction in money to the legal judicial system and to the judiciary through the state budget, because they are not complying with a lot of orders and directives they have written to expedite cases, and they are wasting hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm absolutely convinced of it now, and we shouldn't be paying it. We just shouldn't. So,
well, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention, and I ask everybody in Nashua, in every town, you need to look into this. We are the people. We have the rights. We have God-given rights, 39 enumerated rights in the state of New Hampshire, and we must ensure they're protected at all times. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me again. Yeah, really
Awesome.
appreciate it. Yep.
Have a great day, everybody.